Hello everyone, welcome again to the doctor's office. I'm Dr. Ben. I'm a practicing emergency physician practicing out of the Midwest. In this video, I'd like to do a reaction video to one of my favorite movies, The Hunger Games, starring Jennifer Lawrence. In this scene, we're going to take a look at a particular scene in which CPR needs to be performed. I just wanted to give a rundown on my thoughts on this scene, what CPR shouldn't be and what it should be, and how we should use it. So let's get going. This is some thick jungle, man.
Peeta, no!
Alright, can we just talk real quick about how strong that electric blast was? I mean, we're talking like Jurassic Park level of electric fence. Okay, so it may be shocking to you. Get it? Shocking. In med school, they don't give you a course on what happens in the dystopian future when you're a teenager and you're hacking through the jungle and you hit some sort of enormous electric invisible fence designed by people who are playing dystopian kill games with each other. So I'm gonna kind of go through what I think is going on here. So this seems to me most closely resembling like an electrical lightning strike type injury. Which would make sense that it would, I mean, there's a lot of voltage and current that goes through electric shocks like this, can absolutely stop your heart. So what happens to you in an electric shock type injury, like a lightning strike is, all of a sudden your body gets hit with a huge amount of current and voltage. And you may or may not know your heart relies on electric current to tell its cells when to beat. So what happens if all that current gets suddenly overpowered by an external source like a lightning strike or grabbing an electric wire, all of a sudden all of that intrinsic electrical activity of the heart can suddenly stop if it's hit at the right point. So rather than the nice electrical pattern that your heart normally has, which you can see on any heart monitor if you ever been to the hospital, or on frequently on these television shows, that can get wiped out, and what you're left is potentially a lethal rhythm. Now, commonly with lightning strikes, it will push you into a flatline rhythm where your heart doesn't receive any electrical activity. So rather than your heart beating, all of a sudden it's not moving at all. And what you need to have happen immediately is someone to give you CPR. The other thing that could happen is it goes into a rhythm where it's called fibrillating, or just quivering, shaking, or possibly has a rhythm that's going so fast that its heart cells can't possibly keep up. So it will go like this, or possibly just try to beat so fast that it won't generate a rhythm and push blood forward. It's an important distinction to note that just because your heart has electricity telling it to beat, that doesn't mean the cells are beating themselves. That's something that we as healthcare providers need to quickly identify and then treat. So presumably in this scene, Peeta gets hit with enough electricity that his heart has stopped. And that is very feasible. That happens in lightning strikes, I wouldn't say commonly, but it happens, definitely.
He's not breathing! He's not breathing! He's not breathing!
Okay, so she did an amazing job of quickly recognizing that he wasn't breathing. This can be actually harder to do than you might think. In the current COVID-19 pandemic environment that we're in right now, probably don't recommend you getting next to a stranger's face, though. So Finnick here actually does a really good job. And he's starting CPR. I'm so impressed with him. Finnick, my man, you're killing it, bro. You're killing it. So he's doing exactly what he should be doing. And the person that he's found to be unresponsive, they aren't waking up, they aren't talking to you, and they don't have a pulse, is immediately starting CPR. Now there is a step here in the middle that if you're, in modern times and not in some sort of dystopian kill future, take your cell phone or call out to someone that you need 911 activated. Before you even start CPR, you need to get that ambulance rolling so that they can come with more definitive care. People who are, better trained in CPR, who do this for a living, and for people who have defibrillators in case this is something where we need to give someone a shock. All right, so he's doing full CPR, meaning he's doing compressions on his chest, he's doing breathing and pulse checks, and he's doing and he's giving breaths to Peeta. So it's something that the American Heart Association right now is trying to get people to back away from and go towards something called hands-only CPR, which just means that you are using your hands only instead of doing checks for your pulse, and you aren't doing breaths. Real quick aside, if you're liking this video, give me a like and subscribe below. It helps me create more good content for you, and it helps me boost in YouTube's algorithm so that more people get this video in front of them.
Come on, Peeta.
One other thing I've noticed about this video is when they're giving CPR, it's not really the correct depth, or how forceful he's giving it isn't right. It just looks off. It's hard for me to describe in a video. You really need to practice on a mannequin, which again is why I recommend you do a CPR course. I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. But what you should be doing is 2 inches in an adult for their compression depth. So that's how deep your hand is pushing on their chest. It should be about 2 inches, and a child is about 1/3 of their total chest wall distance from their back to their front. But an adult, 2 inches. Now you need to do this, with a pretty decent amount of force to push that deep in an adult. And I know that can seem scary, but if this person has lost their pulse, they are already dead. You are not going to hurt them any worse by doing this. In fact, you are doing the best thing for them to save their life.
Peeta. Peeta. Oh my God.
Man, so Peeta has a quick recovery, doesn't he? So Peeta now has got his pulse back, so he's perfusing his brain and allows him to wake up. He takes his initial first breath. So after someone regains their pulse, it's typically not as sudden as this. Oftentimes, for us as healthcare providers, it's very subtle to pick up. We're feeling their pulse very closely to see if they're starting to become signs of a pulse. It's not usually as dramatic as someone just all of a sudden's up and breathing. Now that being said, there are exceptions. An electrical injury that stops an otherwise healthy person's heart may be one of them. So if someone starts breathing after you initiate CPR, it's usually a good sign that their pulse is back and you can stop.
You were dead.
He was dead.
You were dead. Your heart stopped.
It's okay.
Yeah, his heart stopped.
It's working now.
Peeta, man of few words.
Do you want to stand up?
Yeah.
Man, Peeta just making the miraculous recovery here. I've never seen someone who suddenly gets their pulse back and immediately is like, I want to stand up and let's get on with our kill game. But Peeta's the man, so. poor Finnick. Oh man. So can we just take a moment here to talk about Finnick in this situation? Finnick recognizes that he doesn't have a pulse, starts CPR, saves Peeta's life, and then gets absolutely no thanks or credit for it. Jennifer Lawrence, our protagonist, goes and hugs Peeta, is so happy that her boyfriend has his pulse back, and here Finnick is just cast to the side. I mean, can we say hashtag Finnick deserves better here? Come on. Alright, so now that we discussed the Jennifer Lawrence version of CPR, let's discuss real life CPR and what to do in this situation. I kind of alluded to it a little bit in the video, but currently if you are not medically trained, if you're a lay person, has never taken a full basic life support class, the American Heart Association right now is recommending something called hands-only CPR, which just means that you witness someone collapse. They are on the ground, they aren't talking to you, they aren't responsive to you, that they recommend you immediately begin compressions on that person's chest. If you're following this protocol, they recommend against checking for a pulse, checking for breathing, or giving rescue breaths. Now, I think that makes a lot of sense currently in the COVID-19 pandemic, because the last thing you want to do to a stranger is probably get mouth to mouth with them. Studies have actually shown that the best predictor of survivability in CPR is the immediate initiation of CPR by a trained person who knows how to give CPR to that person. So what is CPR? CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation, which is the act of giving compressions on someone's chest, and certain protocols recommends giving breaths to them by mouth or with a bag valve mask, which is a piece of medical equipment I would not expect you to have unless you're someone who's working in a hospital, an ambulance, or if you are so equipped in the field and been trained to use it. So with hands-only CPR, what the American Heart Association is saying is that the best thing that you can do as a bystander is begin the initial part of restarting someone's heart with compressions on their chest. And the other drive to do this by the American Heart Association is that they found that people who are not medical professionals, that are not people who are well versed in providing CPR, who don't do it regularly or see it done, is you get into kind of a panic when you see someone collapse and who needs resuscitation, and all your training kind of goes out the window, out of your brain. And so what they're trying to do is simplify the process so that you can provide the thing that is most likely to save that person's life, and that is simple compressions. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I totally am on board with the American Heart Association recommendations for that. What this would look like is someone collapses in front of you. They aren't responding to you. You tap them on the chest, you shake them, say, hey Bill, is anything wrong? And they are not talking to you. Also, they shouldn't be looking like they're breathing. Now, you shouldn't be getting close to their mouth and hands-only CPR and checking for breathing. It should just be you recognize that they are unresponsive. It doesn't look like they are breathing. You would immediately begin compressions on their chest. And so what you would do is you would take your hand, overlap your other hand on top of it. Typically, I do my non-dominant hand down, and with my dominant hand on top, I wrap my fingers like this, and the pad of my hand here is over the sternum, which means the breastbone of the person who needs the CPR. So you can feel on your own sternum, it's your breastbone here in the middle. Feel for the bottom of your sternum. Right above that is where your hand should be placed. So if I can show you my chest here, this is the bottom of my sternum. The pad of my hand would go directly above that, and all my pressure is directed into my breastbone. So I'm not putting weight on my fingers. My fingers really aren't bearing any weight. They're just serving to kind of stabilize. All the pressure is going into the heel of my hand as it pushes against the sternum. And the rate at which you should be doing this is 100 to 120 beats per minute. The American Heart Association has a great reminder of how to do that, and it's the Bee Gees' Stayin' Alive song. Even if you do not want to learn CPR, just watch the music video for this song. It is hilarious. The song is amazing. There is not a chance in the world you're gonna watch this and not start dancing. Okay, so you have activated the emergency system by calling 911. You've begun CPR with compressions on the chest. Your goal is to keep giving compressions until A, that person wakes up, or B, the ambulance arrives. And that is the best thing that you can do to save that person's life. Now, people always ask, what about pulse checks? What about checking for the breathing? Should I be giving rescue breaths? Again, in a panic situation, this is something where even as a healthcare provider, if your adrenaline is pumping, there's a lot of steps to this, and you really have to have it down to root memory to know what to do in what order. So the best chance that you're going to do as a layperson is to just start compressions on their chest. Now, with breathing, there are certain situations in which it would be more beneficial to give rescue breaths. Those are typically cardiac arrests, which occur from a respiratory cause. Unfortunately, that typically is what happens to children who go into cardiac arrest. So if this is a child, your child, a friend's child, we do recommend giving rescue breaths to that child. That would be done with 30 compressions, followed by opening their chin and giving 2 rescue breaths mouth to mouth to them, and then repeating the compressions. But again, that is something that I don't want to cover right now. This is more an adult who becomes unresponsive in front of you and need CPR, I recommend, if you are not a healthcare professional, doing hands-only CPR. And then the last thing is, obviously, J-Lo doesn't have access to this, is trying to get a defibrillator on scene. Now, if you're someone who has never used a defibrillator, you know this is more of a complex step. So if you don't feel comfortable with that, continue to give compressions until the ambulance arrives. But if you are someone who has been trained in a defibrillator or knows how to use a defibrillator, you should be attaching that defibrillator as quickly as possible and determining whether or not this is a cardiac arrest in which they would benefit from getting a shock to the chest. Okay, so that ends my commentary on Hunger Games CPR scene. Overall, I thought it was fantastic. They clearly had a medical consultant on team who told them what CPR should look like, and they did a pretty good job. I use this as my first reaction video as a kind of a template for what CPR should look like, because I think in the future we're going to look at some pretty terrible scenes of what CPR should not look like. Next step moving forward, if you have never taken a CPR course, I cannot recommend enough that you take a CPR course. I will link down in the description links to the American Heart Association for their CPR training, as well as their video on hands-only CPR. I recommend you watch it. It's a short video. It gives you a rundown of everything I just talked about. Also, if you are a healthcare provider, someone who works in a hospital, a nursing home, works on an ambulance, or is required by your job site to have certification for having basic life support or first responder or advanced cardiac life support certifications, I also have a link down below for an online company that I recommend who does this sort of training. They do it for a fee, but it's pretty cheap compared to what you're getting. Get initially trained, get recertified, and get more comfortable with performing some of the more advanced techniques that could potentially save someone's life. So thanks for watching. If you have another clip that you want me to watch or comment on, just type in the comment section below what that is, and I'll review it and see if we can't do that one next. And if you haven't already, give me a like and a subscribe down below. That helps me get more confidence that you guys are enjoying what I'm watching, helps me produce more, and it also helps me boost in YouTube's algorithm so more people can get this content in front of them. So it really helps a lot. And as always, stay happy, healthy, informed, and empowered.